Yeah. Yeah, right. Jordan Bean.
Come and have a good time.
Lean marketing for SaaS.
Welcome to another episode of the Lean Marketing for SaaS podcast. My guest today is Isiah Pasquale. He's the CEO of breadandbutter.io. And he's here today to talk about a new approach to inbound, not especially new, but basically the idea of killing your lead forms entirely in favor of social sign-on. That's your tease. You got to stay to the end to hear more about that, because we're going to start, like I always do, Isiah, with the story of how we met. I want you to tell it.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, JB. Always good to sit down and chat with you. Yeah, we met, I don't know, it's a while ago now, but this was kind of after my first kind of company was acquired. We were kind of spun off into a different project, and that's kind of where we connected, right? Is you were handling a lot of our marketing stuff. And obviously we moved on to different things for a little while, but now we're kind of back together here talking about bread and butter.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that too, because you were a software dev and we didn't have a ton of interactions at the time. But as soon as I saw your last name, I knew that I recognized it from somewhere, and I knew exactly where I recognized it from because I had met your dad many, many, many years previous at a basketball camp when I was 12 years old. Put that into context for us.
Yeah. So obviously, for people who don't know, if you grew up in the Greater Victoria area of British Columbia,
The Western Canada, really. I'm from Powell River, so.
Right. If you were before Steve Nash, my dad, Eli, was kind of the biggest basketball player in Canada. So he did a lot of touring around. He really loved giving back. He loved to kind of expose a new generation to the sport that had given so much to him. So it's funny, I do get it a lot, because if you were kind of in that right age range, he was going around and he was hitting up a lot of schools. So yeah, I'm always like kind of surprised when the connection is made, especially if I'm not in my back home in Victoria, if I'm in Vancouver or whatever, but it happens, and it's obviously what happened with you.
There's a strong basketball pedigree there. Even on our meeting recently, somebody other than me noticed the spelling of your first name.
Yeah. Well, some people think it's biblical if you aren't in the basketball world, but if you followed Isiah Thomas at all, that's the spelling
Bad Boys of Detroit.
Yeah, it's true. So yeah, and it's funny because growing up in Canada, you know immediately if someone's a basketball fan based on how they pronounce my first name. Like, people nail it immediately when they know basketball, right? Growing up, otherwise it was, phonetics and just people trying to sound it out.
People trying their best, but yeah.
It's a quick basketball
Isiah Thomas
reference. Yeah.
I mean, we're here to talk about marketing and conversion and all of these things, because you're
That's
now
true.
the CEO of an app, but like, I can't help but talk about the basketball thing just a little bit more. I'm a basketball fan, and you're a basketball player. You followed in Dad's footsteps a little bit, and you put yourself through school and played basketball. And I want you to talk about that a little bit. But you're not an athlete for your entire career. You made a bit of a transition there too.
Yeah, you can't avoid growing up with basketball if you grew up in my household. It's not possible, but not that I don't love it. And my little brother and I both kind of kept playing past high school into university. And that's how we ended up. I was at UVic originally, which is the university my dad went to, but there was going to be more opportunity to play alongside my brother back in, actually, believe it or not, my dad's hometown, so Sudbury, Ontario. My brother and I went there, and because we have a chance to play together, that was always what we said. We said, if we get a chance to play basketball together, that's awesome. So he ended up going on to play professionally. I would say my knees couldn't take it, but also I wasn't quite as good as he was. So we'll call it the knees and move past it.
But you developed other aptitudes during that career. You played varsity, like you said, at two different universities, but there was a different skill set developing there. When did the software thing start happening?
So what's funny is originally out of high school, I was accepted into the software engineering program at UVic. That was what I originally wanted to do. But then essentially I sat down with the coaches and the head of the department, and they said at the time that they didn't think I could do both, that the engineering first year is so intense that there was just no way in their mind that I was going to succeed. And I think that it made sense to shelve it at the time because, I was committed to basketball first and foremost. And sometimes in those first years, academic studies slide. And I ended up coming back to it after because I said to myself, this is still something I wanted to do. It was something that always interested me. It's something that I loved taking. I love problem solving. I love taking big problems and breaking them down into small components. I think that sport prepares people for a lot of different things. And I think that taking on new challenges is one of the things that competing in sport provides you. You're always looking to strive to do something new. So for me, I just said, let's do it. I dropped what I was doing. I was going to become a teacher because I had a passion working with kids. But I said, you know what, this is my real passion. I want to do this. So I moved away from home, moved to Vancouver, and just enrolled in BCIT and said, I'm going to do this software thing. And it just went from there.
And so then you became a software developer. You also coached basketball as well. So the idea,
Yeah.
I guess, of leadership and taking on challenges is not unfamiliar to you. And now, jumping back to when we met, you were a software developer at the company that preceded Bread and Butter, and now you've been appointed CEO. That's a new scope. I guess maybe another example of Isiah stepping up to accept the challenge and seeing what comes of it. So tell me a little bit about what's happening now, because you're really a brand new software CEO promoted from the seat of software developer, which maybe a lot of people watching this podcast can relate to.
Yeah, I don't think it's a crazy path once you've been in the software world for long enough. I think it helps whenever you're talking about building any type of, SaaS product. I think it helps to have someone in that seat that is technical. I think that obviously people that aren't technical can succeed in that position. I'm not saying you need to be, but I think it helps to really relate to all the different components at the company. And if you kind of have that foot in, I think for anyone that's working as a developer and has been in there for a long time, and if you look around and you say, hey, maybe I'm not looking to stay completely in the back end world or the technical world forever. I think like if you take that jump, it's worth doing, and you bring something to the table that I think not everyone does. So that's just kind of how I feel about it.
Very cool. And so, as a developer, you create things. Before we dig into this product, tell me about the coolest thing that you created as a coder, either, in your school days or since.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing for anyone listening to this that is technical, I just want to get this out of the way. I started as a .NET developer, so don't hold it against me, but that's where I come from. So you're not working on necessarily all the most cool things. The thing that I think was the coolest that we built was secure email. I just am going to default to it because it was such a complex challenge handling all those intricate, all the legality of hanging on to something and protecting people's privacy and making sure no one has access to it. And I think from that angle, really wrapping my head around that will always be one of the coolest things. And having a fully functional, secure messaging platform that was, being used by businesses all over the world, like that's interesting to me, even when it's not flashy on the outside. And I think it transitions a lot into how I was able to transition our whole team into this new project because we come from such a security focused background. This whole idea of handling authentications, which we'll get into with the new product, but it was right in our wheelhouse. So it wasn't like we were learning something new from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Let's start talking about that then. Bread and Butter IO is a tool that handles social sign-ons and passes data to CRMs. And we're going to keep bringing that up as we go here. But it's particularly interesting right now because of some of the trends happening in inbound marketing, just kind of my strength or my wheelhouse, you could say. And this idea of third-party cookies going away. Everybody, whether you're technical or not, you've probably accepted cookies on a website. You know that means that website is attempting to track your behavior and probably feed you third-party ads, and that the idea of that is going away. And I talked about this with previous guests as well, but it's especially relevant in this context because your product solves for that in a way by placing the focus on first-party data, my actual information passed into a CRM with a single click. So in my show notes here, I have to ask you about the word cookie apocalypse. And first I want to talk, I guess, about the eventual expiration of the third-party data play that so many marketers like myself are relying on at this point, and what comes next.
Yeah, so cookie apocalypse, that's something from actually our lead designer. He coined it himself. And
shout out to Rob.
So I remember bringing it up with you, JB, and you liked it immediately. And I have too, because it kind of describes the problem succinctly and in a friendly way, even though what's coming is about to seismically shake the landscape. Third-party cookies from a really high level, which is all I think that matters, was the ability for sites to track you cross-site. So basically, I move from this website to this website. They know those jumps, and they can inform and place ads in front of you based on your pattern of behavior. And from a privacy standpoint, this was always really not okay. We never should have been tracking people in that way. I mean, it's super useful for people in marketing, obviously. But
yeah, I want to show you that ad. Once I know you've seen my stuff, I'm going to show you more.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess it makes everyone's jobs harder, obviously. But I think when you sit back and you say, what's the right thing for the customer and the consumer, I think that you have to say that this is the move, and it's one that Google's taken a while to come to.
There's so much of us willing to spend money on it still that, like the threat is there. They keep saying that it's going to happen, but like it's turning off a massive tap of revenue for what I was almost said Facebook, but of course we got to call them Meta, Google, and all of these where, the retargeting play of, you clicked my ad once, now I'm going to show it to you again and again and again. And again, if you're not technical, that's how this works, right? When you're seeing ads and you feel like you're seeing the same company everywhere, it's by design. They are.
You got put in a bucket, right? And now you're there, and now you're going to see stuff. And that's why the charge has been from us that you can't. It's not like you can't trust big tech. I'm not sitting here with a tinfoil hat and saying, don't trust big tech. But what you can't trust is for them to move the goalposts on the data they've collected. So when you're with Google, that's their data. Like it may feel like you collected it off wherever you were. You might feel like that you have a right to it. You've been with them for years, but the moment they say no, it's done, it's done. And so that's why the push for first-party data was so important for us, because you should be entitled to the data that you collect. You shouldn't be entitled to, obviously, the data that's collected across other sites that aren't your own, but this is your own website. Customers, visitors, prospects, whatever you want to call them, come to that site. You should be able to safely gather that without having a fear that one day they're going to completely obfuscate that data. They're going to completely shut the tap off on you. They're going to present it in a way. One day they're like, oh yeah, of course we can show you what user it was. And then the next they're like, oh no, absolutely not. Like, we're going to show you just like a few characteristics of the users to tell you that.
I mean, as we're having this conversation, Google Analytics has changed drastically to GA4. There's what you can and can't see, and how stuff is collected is not determined by us. It's determined by their whims with the tools.
Exactly.
Let's dig into like why wait? Let's actually talk about exactly how the product works. Every marketer watching this is probably in some form or another wanting to collect data on their website visitors, their users, their prospects, their leads, as you said, whatever you want to call them or whatever stage of the buying process they're in. You want to learn more about them as quickly as you can. And that's exactly what your tool does. Tell me how, and specifically, tell me why you arrived at the conclusion that it should not be the classic lead form that you see everywhere on websites.
Yeah. So let's first just talk about it from a really high level. What we're doing is we are giving you a suite of tools, pre-built UI stuff that you can just throw a snippet on, or if you're using WordPress, which is one of our preferred spots because the plugin that we have works very, very well with it.
Still something like 50% of all websites are powered by WordPress.
Yeah, exactly.
Business
right.
Websites. Yeah.
So what we do is we provide you with this whole set of tools so you can turn it on anywhere you need. And what it provides you with is these widgets, we like to call them, that allow people to use SSO buttons to perform actions. So whether that's just logging in to your site or whether that's gating content behind, when you go to New York Times, you see, after you read, you have a scroll stop kind of on it that blocks you from reading anymore, or just straight content gates you see where it's like you need to straight log in to see this page, right?
Load my ebook.
Yeah, exactly. White paper type stuff. So we
Sign
provide
up for my
you
webinar.
with, yeah, exactly. So we provide a whole suite of tools that you don't have to code it out. You don't have to do anything. You just get these social buttons that we also support email and password, but social buttons is what we want to talk about because that's where the value is. If we're speaking to marketers, I think specifically, there was a statistic that when given the option, 80% of users choose to convert with an account they already have. And that is the real reason why we pivoted so hard into SSO over lead forms. When you put a lead form in front of somebody, and everyone's been there, right? There's not a person that hasn't stared at a form and said, well, that's way too many questions. And
even if it's name and email.
Yeah. Like, what's the name of your firstborn child? To solve this aggressive CAPTCHA at the end. And like, I don't know
Click
about
every
you.
square with a car. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but like I've had my parents contact me and say, how do I get through this CAPTCHA? Like, what is this asking me to do? And if you have people that are legitimately needing to call someone to prove that they're human or to, fill in these forms, you're bouncing people off that you do not want to be bouncing people off. And so that's why we came up with this idea of a frictionless way of gathering that same data that you don't want to ask for. You put this button in front of someone. JB is very fond of the LinkedIn button.
Love the LinkedIn button. We're coming back to that. Don't worry.
But you put this social login right in front of somebody. And I think you've seen it. Anyone that's experienced this, saw this anywhere on the internet, how many sites now are starting to put this in, and they're putting it in for a reason. They're saying, I want single sign-on buttons because people are more likely to use it. People do not want to build more passwords. People do not want to fill in personal information. They just want to move through it. So that's the whole premise from the front end of what we do, is easing that experience of, yes, this is something I know, this is something I trust. Let's just go through. And now you have that info. I'm
okay with them knowing my name and email because it's the same one I use for Google. And it's not just that they are, I'm going to lead you here with a question as the marketing guy. It's not just that they are more likely to choose an account they already have, but they're more likely to convert at all. And that is the magic. And I guess that's why, you're flat out saying, kill your forms.
It's happened with our clients. Like, it's not something that I'm like, oh, I woke up one day and said, oh yeah, let's kill forms, right? This has been proven true when we talk about the people we're doing business with, that if you swap out that lead form and you swap in those social buttons, you are going to see at a minimum 20% boost in your conversion rate. 20% more people will choose to do it than were doing it before. And I know we'll probably get into it later, but the actual quality of the leads that you start to get increases as well. So it's not just the boost, it's the decrease in, everyone's seen it,
ASDF.
SDSK at SDFA.
ASDF at. Yeah. I've done it. Yeah.
Who hasn't?
I want it like, it's like pause for a moment and repeat what you just said. A 20% lift in conversions by removing a form from your website.
Yes.
That will be the YouTube thumbnail of this podcast interview. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's your headline, folks. 20% lift in conversions by removing the fields on the form and going with social sign-on. And we know that I love that LinkedIn button. And we know that most people watching this are familiar with the idea of a social sign-on button and can probably figure out a way to put one on their website. That's only the first half. Tell me what happens next and why it is the suitable replacement for the third-party cookie apocalypse.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on quickly about someone putting a social button on their site. That is 100% possible for sure. What we're offering you, especially on top of everything else, like let's just speak to WordPress for a second. You have an existing database, let's say on WordPress of users. We integrate with it instantly. So you're not building in a new auth system. You just put this on top, and now every user that is currently in your system is going to still be able to auth in with a provider. Any new users are going to end up in that database. So there is a level of ease that, yes, you can implement single sign-on on your own, but instead of wasting that time, tomorrow you could be up with it on and you'd see no drop-off on your current user base. Like, they don't have to do anything, and new users are automatically able to do it. So just to hammer on that point there, because it's true. I'm not going to argue that you couldn't do single sign-on yourself, for sure not. And I don't think that's the product as we're selling it. But I do want to say that the product we are selling, it does take a little, it eases that friction. It eases that time that you'd waste on your own building that out when you can just have it up tomorrow.
That's useful for the folks that care about their WordPress database. And I get that. But I think, a lot of people, particularly in my line of work, are more concerned about all of the things that I can learn about my prospects and my customers. And I put that into a CRM, like a HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, Pipedrive, tools like this, where, once somebody is in my system, I want to know whether or not it's worth it for me to follow up and sell to them.
Yeah. So that's an excellent point, right? Some people operate a WordPress site as a full-on site, but a lot of people, us included, use our WordPress site as a marketing site. It's a marketing site that fronts our actual product sitting somewhere else. So for people like that, your marketing site really is a way of driving leads and prospects into your system so you can start converting those people into paying customers. So yes.
That's 100% of my customers, right?
Yes.
That's why I get hired.
Yeah. So what we do, and this is where I think we differentiate ourselves from a lot of people, is let's say you're on Pipedrive as your CRM. When your users come in and, click the social button and log in, first time that happens, right away when that happens, we are going to create a person record in Pipedrive for you. So you'll have the person, you'll have first name, last name, email, when they came in, where they're from, if you're using campaigns and keywords and stuff, that data is captured as well. So it'll tell you what was the keyword they used to reach my website. Where were they referred from? So, are they coming from a site that is pretty good at bringing people into your spot? Et cetera, et cetera. So
that beats the pants off of Google Analytics that won't tell you that stuff. I digress.
So GA, which we also integrate, we're not trying to kill GA. We don't believe that. We believe that this is a supplement to that data. GA gives you really big trends, right? Like, it'll show you lots of graphs, lots of big things about the totality of your user base, right? Well, once you're in a CRM, though, it's about the person. It's not about the trend. It's about that one person in front of you. And is this person a good person to reach out to? How do I approach this person? And so that's why we put the user front and center of the whole experience. So yes, that user goes in, but the other pieces you get as they're, navigating your website. So let's say, from a really simple example, you have a piece of gated content, let's say, on your page, right? And
like
it's
an ebook.
Yeah, an ebook. So an ebook that is telling you the lean SaaS marketing playbook,
There you
right?
go. There you go.
So when that person goes in and they convert, what you're also going to see automatically updated into Pipedrive is information about their session each time they come back. So your salesperson that's assigned to that is going to get notified. This person's back at your website. They're going to get a dump as at the end of it that tells you this was the page they cared about the most. They were the most engaged here. They dropped off here at this page. They entered this way. They spent, the idea is just to show you a path as to how their behavior matches up. So right away, JB could say, I mean, I know you're selling to SaaS companies pretty much exclusively, but let's say you weren't. Let's say it wasn't just the lean SaaS marketing playbook. Let's say you had another one for a different industry and altogether. Well, you would now start to see, just based on where they're paying attention on your page, to which is the approach. How do you put that deck together to say, hey, this is how I want to deal with this person? Or is this person even worth dealing with, right? They might have bounced in they converted, approached it, bounced, and you know that there's a totally different path for this user, right? But the idea behind it is that over time, as you use our product, these engagement scores tell you, well, this is a user that's worth approaching by default. Like this user compared to every other user is much more engaged with your product. They've come back many times to check it out. So you can now, without having a salesperson going to their website, Googling what they're doing, Googling the person, checking them out, you can instead infer everything that you need to know about them to make that first contact when you're trying to close that deal. So that's the value, and that's where our customers have seen the value.
So if I'm a sales development representative and I'm looking at my Pipedrive CRM, I can take that engagement score that you talked about and maybe can I filter for engagement score and then contact people in order of, where are the 9s out of 10s? And
yeah, so you can, how we primarily do it is to be flexible to the use case. So for us to sit here and say, this is how you should run your Pipedrive account or whatever CRM you're using, is not, no one's sales process is the same, right? So we allow you to map any data that we collect to fields. So whether that's, I want to update my actual person record, I'm just going to go back to Pipedrive because the lingo's specific. I go back to that person record and I could go and I could say, I'm going to add an engagement score field. And every time this user comes through, I want to update them with the latest engagement score. And so then that would be there. And then you can filter for that field and you can find based on the values inside that field. So that's the type of flexibility. So we're not saying this has to be how it's done. For example, campaign tracking, keyword tracking, those are not default fields inside Pipedrive. So if you don't care about it, it's not there. But if you do care about it, those fields will exist. And now you'll be able to see more about your prospect.
Anybody who's spending money on advertising is going to care about stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about Pipedrive, I look at it from the sales dev representative who's the poor soul that has to hit the phone or email and follow up and create that deck and all of those things to try to move a sale along. But it's just as crucial for people who are even, I don't want to say e-commerce, but certainly people that are more concerned about what's the performance of this ad campaign and, what's working, what got them here in the first place, and where should I be investing my dollars more heavily to get more people like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the clarity around the user, right? It's one thing to say this is a trend and that's cool. Like you mark a conversion and it goes into GA4 and that's great. It really is. But it's a whole other thing when you can look at the full picture of a user, see how they're coming to your page, seeing how they are functioning, putting a set of human eyes on that person itself and being like, okay, these campaigns are performing really well for us, or these campaigns are not performing well for us at all, even though it looks like they are, because people are converting, but they're the wrong people that are converting, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of transparency, that kind of user-centric focus is why we built it. We're not, like I said, we're not fighting. No one should fight Google Analytics. You're never
Yeah.
gonna like fight Google
Right.
Analytics, but
Price is
there are
right on it.
things, yeah, there are things that you don't want to have to, like, there are things it doesn't do as well, and we're trying to also fill in that functionality.
So this is why you say kill your forms, boost your sales, because it's not just the 20% lift on the front end that you're talking about, but with all the intel you collect on the back end, you come to a sales call or certainly the sales follow-up process with a lot more ammunition.
Yeah. So this is what I've tried to, I don't know, I guess if I was to like get up here and like give a little bit of like my rant as to how I think
that's what you're here for, dude. Let's have it.
I don't believe that we should be throwing those questions in people's faces. I think that it's a mistake. I think it's always been a mistake. I understand why at one point we did it. There was no way to know, right? Like there was just no way to know. So like, why would you not need to ask those questions? But now,
how did you hear about us? How much money does your company earn per month? And
just
yeah,
right.
And I ask those questions, but I don't ask them until after somebody converts, right?
And how often do you give a meaningfully correct answer to those questions? How often? How often do you actually go, oh yeah, here's the headcount of my company, no problem? Like it's crazy. So the data they're collecting isn't even correct. So why do that? And what you're really asking for when you say this whole spiel is you say, I just want to know some stuff about you so that I can put the right deck in front of you when I go to reach out, right? When I go to close this deal. So the paradigm shift that I'm encouraging, like for example, not everyone believes in content gating. I'm 50-50 on it. Like I think it works for some people. I think it doesn't work for other people. But what
depends on the value. Yeah. That's a hot debate. Could be a whole separate podcast episode.
And this is why I think that there is no answer to it, is because in some situations it is the right move, and in some situations it's not the right move, and that's why it's going to be debated to the end. If you tell me there is never a reason to put a content gate into somebody, or you tell me there's always a reason to put a content gate in front of somebody, I'm like, you're wrong. The point is that there's nuance to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing that I have been proposing and the paradigm that I'm trying to introduce is putting content on your page in front of people that tells you those answers about them that you don't want to ask. So yes, with the SSO buttons, yes. Do we collect a lot of information about the person? Yes, for sure. But there are certain questions, qualitative maybe questions, that can be answered much better by what draws someone to the page. If you structure a landing page that's much more corporate, much more big business, you're going to instantly know the kind of person that has come to that page, versus if you play it a little whimsical, you're shooting for those like small businesses, small players. Using content to learn about your customers and putting different fields in front of them, it's going to tell you a lot more about your customers than a sheet is ever going to do, because a form is ever going to do, because a form relies on them to be honest with you. Their behavior does not. Their behavior is always honest, and you'll always know what they're interested in based on that. So that's my, if I'm going to put a flag in this, just plant my flag on something, it's that we need to stop throwing these questions in people's faces, getting them to bounce, or getting bad answers in the first place. And then what's worse, you go to interact with the person, you put a deck in front of them as if they're a 500 headcount company, and it's just like some person. Like, it's use behavior on your site, that first party data you've collected, to inform your sales team automatically. That's why we push to the CRMs, automatically inform them so that they don't have to do that search. They have that nugget that they need to just get that first interaction going, right? And I don't know, I feel like I'm probably preaching a bit to the converted with you, but how often you probably want that one, just what's that little thing about that person that just makes this feel like not a stock reach out, but something that feels personal, feels a little bit like that. And not that it's not personal, but you definitely don't want it to feel like a robot's reaching out to you, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Without question. And as you know, I love the LinkedIn button. We talked about it. We knew we were going to come back to this, and we've been talking a while. So I want to wrap up pretty soon. But the final question is about LinkedIn. I think there's a huge opportunity there because of how important LinkedIn has become in so many people's sales process and with social selling and with, networking in general, that, you could focus on LinkedIn users with a LinkedIn button to convert LinkedIn users and never miss a meal, as as my family would say. I want to you because and sort of at my behest, I've started using LinkedIn a little bit more often now and getting a little bit more familiar with it. Tell me what that's been like. You're sort of being pushed into, like, out of the comfort zone and onto LinkedIn a little bit more and discovering it a little better. So for the folks who are watching this who are, drinking the LinkedIn Kool-Aid like me, what's it like to be on LinkedIn as a fresh tech CEO?
Yeah. So first off, I'm never been a massive social media guy. Like that was, I feel like maybe I was like one of the last generations that kind of was on the cusp. Like I had a Facebook account when I was in university, right? And that was kind of that was probably the highest usage in my personal life with social media. And so LinkedIn kind of, like JB, like you mentioned, I started as a coach. It's not like, and LinkedIn was barely like existing right at that point. And then I was a student and I kind of got my first job directly out of like a placement out of school. So I didn't need the networking power that I have learned LinkedIn has until now. And I didn't really understand just how powerful the tool is for connecting you to other professionals, other people that have similar interests in the business world. Like I that's I just didn't know. I thought that a lot of it was just a standard social media site, which it is. Like people are connecting personally with their friends and stuff. Like most of my LinkedIn network is personal friends of mine. But
So far.
I, yeah, so far. But I had no clue that it was going to be like just from, so let's tie this back into my product. Just from me announcing my position as CEO and putting one post out there, just kind of like saying like, here, hey, what's up? I don't have the numbers in front of me because I just kind of was thinking about it yesterday because another person in our kind of sales squad was like, hey, have you noticed this? And it was a massive uptick in LinkedIn people referred from LinkedIn. So people that must have interacted with the post, must have gone to either our company site from seeing the post or saw that content, logged in with their LinkedIn accounts there. So use the account they're comfortable with. And now, if you're a person that is trying to sell, especially if you're trying to sell on LinkedIn, you now knew that this person was in your ecosystem. You know that they came with LinkedIn. You know who they are on LinkedIn. I went and sent out some connection requests to people that had come to the site, and now we're in a conversation, right? And that kind of that doesn't happen on Instagram.
One LinkedIn post. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I feel vindicated. This is news to me, by the way. And
yeah, well, I wanted to surprise you with some content on your podcast. So I just held off on letting you know.
I told you.
Yeah.
Let's keep that momentum up now.
Yeah. No, and it instantly made me understand just how much reach it is because it's not just your network, it's your network's network, right? That's how this algorithm moves stuff along. So I don't think it is going to be like the only channel that people should market on, but if you're neglecting the LinkedIn channel, I feel like you're just not you're leaving money on the table.
Mm-hmm. So LinkedIn users out there that are trying to convert new business, put that LinkedIn social sign-on button on your website. Connect that data directly to your CRM of choice. Isiah, we've been talking for a long time, and we'll wrap it up here. But tell me how people can get a hold of Isiah Pasquale.
Yeah, so I think the best way is on LinkedIn.
Bring it. There it is.
So you can check me out there, but also breadbutter.io is our website. It's also our company profile on LinkedIn as well. So if you go to either of those, that's breadbutter.io. You can learn more there, try it out. I know you'll love it once you get going on it. So that's kind of it.
All right, man. Thanks very much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like we could talk all day. Sometimes we do. It's just
True.
we just recorded this one is all.
So we'll just pause this, end the recording, and we'll just keep chatting. So
there you go. Thanks again, dude.
all right. Thanks, JB.
Bye.
Bye.